Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
All right, thanks a lot, and thank you for tuning in to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Rich Walsh. I'll be joined by Chris Mueller in a matter of moments. Right here, we'll be taking your phone calls tonight. We have a lot to talk about, including what happened with the pro football writers. Were these all Cleveland writers, Chris? Like, how in the world is T.J. Watt not the Pro Football Writers Defensive Player of the Year? I understand, Myles Garrett is pretty good, and a lot of these guys go off PFF, and I know you like PFF, but I mean, like I just said a little bit ago, the eye test and stats tell the story, doesn't it?
I don't know. I think the eye test is pretty favorable for Myles Garrett, who wrecked Trent Williams for the most part, who for my money is the best left tackle and best offensive lineman in football when the Browns played them. Listen, you know what my big takeaway is? I mean, we have relitigated the should T.J. Watt win Defensive Player of the Year? Why is it going to be a travesty and an injustice against all football-watching humanity that Myles Garrett's probably going to win it? Because I think 8 of the last 9 PFWA winners have won the AP award, the big one. You know what my big takeaway is? This is what we're left with and reduced to in this town, where we would once be getting ready maybe for a conference title game or talking about maybe the Steelers' heartbreaking exit in a divisional game. Now we're sitting here hoping that T.J. Watt can win an award, an individual award, because this team doesn't actually win playoff games or seriously compete for playoff pushes, deep pushes anymore. Like that's been. I'm changing the subject, Richie, and you know what? That's my prerogative. Like I'm Bobby Brown here or something, right? I'm so tired of the fact that we have to relitigate this because people here are so bent out of shape about it. When it's an individual award that in the past people would have said, that's nice, like I hope he wins it, but not cared this much about it, because this is all Steelers fans have to seize onto, the idea that our guy is definitively better than your guy, even though they're both top 3 in the NFL.
Well, I think it has a lot to do that he plays for Cleveland. I think that's one, and that little rivalry there. But also, it is something to talk about. I think social media has blown this up more. When James Harrison, can you remember when he won Defensive Player of the Year? Because Twitter wasn't around or was in its infancy, or Facebook, things aren't as big now because everyone can chime in on it, and that's why it feels like it's larger than life. But hey, I like talking about what you touched on there a little bit, and I do want to ask you right off the top of the show, are the Steelers getting closer to being back to where they were then? If that's something that we should be talking about and hope that we'd be talking about someday, what do they need to do? Which one of these guys do they need to hire? Do you think they could get there with Mason Rudolph, or do they need to find someone else? I know it's a lot to digest right now, but take it away.
I mean, I don't even think they're going to get there with Mason Rudolph, because I think they have no intention of getting there with Mason Rudolph. But as we sit and observe what they're going to do with the quarterback position this offseason, which I think is going to be, obviously Kenny Pickett will be back. I think they're hoping desperately that a team makes a solid competitive offer to Mason Rudolph that they don't feel obligated to match, and then they can tell people, hey, he was, that's a pretty rich offer for a guy that played 3 pretty good games at the end of the season and 1 okay game in the playoffs. I think they don't want any part of having Mason Rudolph come back to them and say, I don't like the offers out there. What's your best deal? Because I don't think they want him back, because I think they want the road paved for Kenny Pickett, Richie. But as we talk about all the machinations when it comes to quarterback for them this offseason, I can't help but think of this kind of metaphor. Imagine if you were watching, say, a NASCAR race, right? And the cameras weren't actually focused on the 8 or 9 cars in the lead. You were on the last lap, and they were only focusing on which 2 cars were going to beat out one another for 11th place in the race, right? Regardless of whether it's Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph does come back, or it's a free agent type of guy, like a Brissett-level guy who comes in, what are we really talking about here, realistically? The Steelers' quarterback being maybe 10th best in the conference if they're lucky? I think they should hire, if I had to make a power rankings of the 4 guys that have been definitively connected to the job opening right now, it would be Zach Robinson, then Thomas Brown, then Arthur Smith, and then Cliff Kingsbury. But when I come back to the quarterback part of the equation, I just think, what are we actually watching this team prepare and jockey for? Think of how many guys in the AFC are studs at that position, Rich.
Yeah, and this AFC and NFC championship proves that you need an elite quarterback. I think All the playoffs prove that you need an elite quarterback to win. You saw what Josh Allen did to the Steelers. I was there. Patrick Mahomes, what he can do, Lamar Jackson. The Steelers need that guy, and obviously they don't have that guy on their roster right now. But it would be interesting if they do go with Robinson because of his ties with Rudolph. I would like to see how that plays out if that happens.
I mean, I know we had Aditi Kinkhabwala today tell us something on the PM team that neither Andrew nor I knew was a thing, but apparently Robinson helped Rudolph prep for the draft, basically, like did a little coaching, one-on-one to help him prep for his NFL draft run. And yeah, people would draw the obvious conclusion that those two might want to work together. They, are tied at the hip by Oklahoma State, but I really don't think, all due respect to Rudolph, who I thought was really good late in the season and in a lot of ways deserves this starting job right now, deserves to come back and just be the starter. I don't think Zach Robinson, having coached for a team that has Matthew Stafford these last couple of years, is kind of tying whether or not he gets this job or wants this job to Mason Rudolph being there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just thought it would be interesting because if Rudolph comes back, I wouldn't say that he's taking the job because of Mason Rudolph.
No, I wouldn't like – I'll tell you what. Sure, I wouldn't like it if I were Kenny Pickett. If Zach Robinson gets this job and suddenly Mason Rudolph comes back and signs like a free agent deal and agrees to be at least the backup to start the season, if I were Kenny Pickett, I wouldn't like that. I'd say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So you're bringing in the equivalent, in some ways, you're bringing in like a Mark Whipple equivalent here. If I were if that's who you were bringing in, Mason or whoever would feel bad about that because I had that relationship with him at Pitt. It would be the same thing, just in the other direction. I wouldn't feel great about that. I wouldn't like that if I were Pickett.
All right. We'll continue our Steelers talk, plus get into Jim Harbaugh, and also talk a little bit about Aliquippa. Their appeal was denied by the PIAA today. So all that and more, 412-575-2600, next after the break. All right. Now our GMC tweet of the night. This is from our friend Michael Birch over at the Steelers, the communication manager over there. And he just, look, this is black and white right here. Black, gold, and white, actually. But you can see, T.J. Watt basically wins every single statistic. I don't know what else. I mean, other than tackles for loss on run plays, and you said the eye test potentially. But I don't know. I don't know where this hate is against T.J. Watt nationally.
I mean, I just think people are looking at the way the Browns played on defense for probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the season. And if you want to come up with a flaw in the methodology here, I'll humor everyone. Garrett was quiet down the stretch, disappeared like Parsons did in the playoffs. Obviously, Watt didn't play, and everyone knows that hamstrung the Steelers against Buffalo. But yes, I think Garrett is getting the award in part because he was so good for the first, I would say, probably 11 or 12 games of the season, and then kind of the faucet turned off there. I think there's also this perception. Garrett affected games, and I know you don't want to hear about pass rush, win rate, or anything like that, but he was on such an unbelievable tear and was so disruptive that teams, I think it was Tennessee, Richie, I don't know if you remember this highlight. Usually it's offense goes in motion to see how the defense is going to play. Like if the defender trails the motion man, it's man-to-man. If he doesn't, it's zone. The Titans had multiple guys continually go in motion wherever Garrett lined up. And if Garrett got up and moved in the formation, they got up and motioned over to the other side of the formation to block him. So there was this fear factor and everything else. And he was disrupting plays without getting to the quarterback all the time. He was rushing passes. He was breaking down the pocket quickly. But I understand if people say, wait a minute, that's not really how these awards in their minds were determined in the past. Why start now? But I think that's the best explanation I could give you as to why he's going to end up getting it.
All right, let's go out to Joe in Verona. How you doing, Joe?
Richie, hi, Chris.
Hey.
Listen, I happened to watch Colin Cowherd today in the herd, and he said Tomlin, which he usually backs him a little bit, but he says, defensive coaches are behind the eight ball, but he said Tomlin has not got the offense or an offensive quarter, OC for a decade and a half, and that was amazing that he said that. Now, it's his opinion, but that goes to say a lot what's happening here in Pittsburgh and how mediocre we are.
All right, thanks a lot, Joe. Hey, Chris, I think it's interesting that they're bringing in two guys with Sean McVay ties.
Well, I know that Mike Tomlin is friends, I think respects Sean McVay, has a lot of respect for Kyle Shanahan. In fact, I know he does. I mean, I think we've heard him talk about those guys. I think wasn't it the opener of the season when he disrespected Brock Purdy? And I'm sure back then when the season was fresh and no one knew anything, people probably loved this. He said you've got to stop a Kyle Shanahan offense and Christian McCaffrey. That shows how much he respects that guy. I think he feels the same way about McVay. So I like the fact that they are going in that direction. I do think Omar Khan, Andy Weidel, Art Rooney are all involved here. I'd like to believe also, I don't know about you, Rich, but there's kind of two ways you could go. You could say that those three I named who aren't Mike Tomlin saw the level of failure and said, Mike, we're not letting you do this alone, which is one way. Or the better way, which is Mike understood on his own, hey, this just hasn't worked, and acknowledged it and was willing to be collaborative about it. I really hope it's kind of situation two there, scenario two, because that suggests that he's not wedded to his own principles and is willing to admit when things didn't work, which I think has been a problem for him in the past.
I definitely feel like it's a combination of both from being around there. I mean, it might take Mike Tomlin a little bit of time to get there. Obviously, he doesn't want to listen to outsiders. I mean, he's a football guy and wants to do his things his way. I totally understand that. But at some point when you have the worst offense in the NFL and you've been pounding your head against the wall and nothing's working for the first 10 weeks of the season, you have to make a change, and he did. Things started to look a little bit better, but you have to go outside at this point. I mean, the fans have spoken. I don't think you want to lose your fan base, and I think that's where Art Rooney steps in, Omar Khan, Andy Weidel. I think all those guys will have a say, and that's what I like about this year. I don't think it'll just be Mike Tomlin hiring the guy.
Well, I think whoever they hire, and some of these early names are encouraging, like this type of guy they're looking for. Mike also needs to do something else important, and Jerry Dulac mentioned this in his chat today, that Mike kind of, not bossed Canada around, but kind of did, and really set the overall direction for the offense being so conservative. Quite honestly, I think Mike needs to let whatever coordinator they hire have autonomy to actually run the offense. Frankly, I'd like to see him do that with a defensive coordinator, hire someone other than Terrell Austin and let that guy run the defense. If even Snoop Dogg can admit that maybe it's time for Mike to be more of a CEO, then I think it's safe for me to do it too. I would just especially want him on the offensive side of the ball, which is not his area of ultimate expertise. Whoever they hire gets to do what they want to do and gets to actually run the offense the way they see fit.
I agree 100%. And also maybe add more coaches to your staff. I think you got to catch up to other teams and what they're doing, like passing game coordinators and all these other assistants for other jobs.
Yeah, that's an Art Rooney thing. I would certainly like to see them hire more coaches and have more, I'm trying to think of the right word, not organizational kind of, not bureaucratic red tape, right, deciding how the sausage gets made there, but just have more areas of expertise, more brain power on the staff. I think that's been a huge issue for them over the years.
Bob, Washington. What's up, Bob?
Hi. I was calling about the Steelers coaching.
Okay.
Hey, I like Mike Tomlin. I think he did a great job. He doesn't discipline anybody, and I think Harris came out and said he doesn't discipline anybody. He doesn't control it. He did good. She's played it next year. He shouldn't be extended. Now, I know you're going to hate what I'm going to say. I think Belichick would be a good fit there. Everybody else hates Belichick, but he's a coach that has discipline.
All right, well, that's never going to happen. And a lot of players refuted that.
What has discipline gotten Bill Belichick? What has discipline gotten him the last couple of years? Seriously.
Yeah,
what's the vaunted Bill
anymore.
Belichick, do your job, I'll cut you. If you're one of the guys on the bottom of the roster, there will be roster churn. What's that earned Bill Belichick without Tom Brady? I will hang up and listen, Richie, because I already know the answer. Jack squat.
Drafting guys out of position when you think you're the smartest guy in the room. I'm not saying the game has passed him by. He's one of the greatest coaches to ever coach his game. But I think he's on the back nine for sure. Maybe on the last hole. So yeah, I'm not interested in bringing him here. I'd actually like to see the opposite. Whenever Mike Tomlin decides to go, I'd like to see a young up and coming guy and take a chance on someone like that instead of hiring another guy from another team that hasn't had success lately. So, but as for what Harris said, I know he said it, but a lot of players refuted it and refuted that they didn't really know what he was talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure Najee Harris, despite, it's funny, he said all that, and Mike Tomlin seems to want to make him the leader in that room, and then he kind of stabs him in the back a little bit and tries to pretend he wasn't actually talking about coaching, which he was, clearly. I'm not so sure, though, that he's like some beloved guy in that locker room, necessarily, because I think Najee Harris's comments typically are pretty heartily influenced, I should say, by how he played in whatever game he's speaking after. He has a good game, even if the team loses a narrow one. He usually sounds pretty chipper. He has a bad game like he did against Buffalo and they go down to defeat and their season ends. Suddenly you get him spilling his guts about everything. I don't think he's necessarily a reliable narrator all the time here is what I'm saying.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to get your thoughts on this Aliquippa appeal. All right, thanks a lot, Ken. See you in a couple of minutes. All right, Chris. Aliquippa loses its appeal to move up to 5A. They wanted to stay in 4A, so they'll be playing in 5A the next 2 years. Head coach Warfield said that they potentially might go to court on this, that there might be more legal action. I don't think that these appeals should be a one-size-fits-all. I think they should look at it individually, and it seemed like reading some of the articles in the stories, Mike White of the Post-Gazette, it seemed like the decision was made because they didn't ask any questions.
I mean, the bottom line for me is this puts the kids in harm's way. I think Aliquippa, talent-wise, at the high-end talent, can absolutely compete and will likely exceed most of its brethren in 5A, but they simply don't have enough bodies on that team. They're going to have teams that have 20, 30, 40 more kids on there. And they're going to be asking their kids to play both ways all game. It's going to get kids hurt, and it's a terrible decision, I think. I really do. I think it's actually kind of shameful, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Aliquippa should be playing in 2A. They elected to move up. I mean, that rule should go out the window if a team's already electing to play up anyways. And the fact that the transfers only counted for 6 out of 1,132 points, that they hardly had an impact.
I think it's jealousy. I'd love to know how Southern Columbia continues to stay in 2A despite having the same kind of success. You know, I've heard a lot of shady stories about what goes on there with some associated technical school potentially. It's just terrible for the Aliquippa kids. I hope they win 5A and shove it in everybody's faces.
Me too. Thanks a lot, Chris. See you tomorrow. Hopefully I see you guys over on KDK News right now.